Hello, everyone. My name is John, and welcome to video number 2 on our walkthrough of full preterism. And today we're going to be talking about the book of Daniel. And this is a potent book in this series and very important to understand what happened in 70 AD. Now, we're going to be doing this video in 2 movements. And in the first movement, we're going to establish that Daniel 12 contains a specific bounded prophecy with a specific appointed time, and that Jesus quotes directly from Daniel in Matthew chapter 24. And his quote from Daniel ties that prophecy specifically to the first century. So, movement number 2 establishes that the fulfillment of Daniel's book proves the events were far off from Daniel's perspective, and the unsealing of John's book proves the same events were near from John's perspective in the book of Revelation. Together, these 2 movements do something that no single argument alone can do, and that is that they lock in the 70 AD date from both ends simultaneously. Now, before we begin, we have to understand one thing that is absolutely critical to understanding Daniel's prophecy in Daniel chapter 12, and that is that the vision starts in Daniel 10. So 10 through 12 is one continuing prophecy. And so we have to go back and understand the prophecy from its beginning to end. So when we come to Daniel chapter 12, we understand that this is the culmination of a vision that had started in Daniel chapter 10. So that context is very important. Now, with that context, let's go to Daniel chapter 12 and verse 1. And it says, "At the time, Michael, the great prince who protects your people, will rise. There will be a time of distress such as has not happened from the beginning of nations until then." Now, the Hebrew word here is bayet hahi, at that time. This phrase ties Daniel 12 and 1 directly to everything that precedes in Daniel 11. The quote, "at that time," is not some future vague reference. It is pointing back to a specific historical context of the vision already in progress. So this "at that time" is referencing something that's already happening in the vision that is being given to Daniel. Now, Michael is said to stand up, and the word arise or stand up is amad, to stand, to take a position, to rise in action. Now, you remember we talked about this in our first video. We already discussed this. So in this context of Daniel, Michael is identified in Daniel 10 and 13 and 12 and 1 as one of the chief princes and your prince. His arising is a signal of decisive divine action on behalf of God's covenant people at a critical moment. Now, there is this thought out there that this angel or Michael is the Messiah himself, Yeshua. Now, I'm not saying that's what I believe or that is a fact. However, that is a thought that is out there in the ethers, that the angel Michael is Yeshua himself. The time of trouble, a time of distress such as has not happened from the beginning of nations until then. This is the language Jesus quotes almost word for word in Matthew 24 and 21. "For then there will be great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again." Now, it just stuns me how people will say that they'll look at this and they reject the idea of 70 AD as being a time of distress unequaled in human history until that time and never will be. And so what they'll do is they'll point to what Hitler did to the Jews. They will say that was way worse than that. So what you are telling me is that the atrocities caused by man supersedes the divine judgment that God did? Is that what you're saying? I will have to politely differ from you on that. And I know why people are saying that, because they're trying to justify a future coming of Jesus Christ. So surely that wasn't it. So I get where that comes from. Now, Jesus in Matthew 24 is not creating a new prophecy. He is identifying the fulfillment of Daniel 12 and 1. He is telling his disciples sitting on the Mount of Olives in the first century that what Daniel saw is what they are about to experience. You're about to experience the fulfillment of Daniel's prophecy. And we'll talk about it here in a second. But guess what? The fulfillment of Daniel's prophecy is the opening of what Daniel was told to seal because it was for a future generation. But the Greek word Jesus uses in Matthew 24 and 21 is thlipsis, tribulation, distress, pressure. The LXX uses the same word to translate the Hebrew Zahar, distress, in Daniel 12 and 1. Same word. It's the Hebrew equivalent of the Greek word thlipsis. Same word. And it's important to understand that because the connection is textual, not interpretive. Jesus is quoting Daniel in 12 and 1 directly. He is placing the fulfillment within the context of the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple, the events of 70 AD. This is simply not a debatable interpretive connection. He is applying it to what his disciples asked him, which was about the destruction of the temple. The destruction of the temple. So it's a direct literary quotation with first century application made by Jesus himself. This is not somebody outside imposing it upon the text. This is Jesus making the connection. So Daniel 12 and 2, the resurrection language, at that time was in 12 and 1. In the very next verse, multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt. And that Hebrew word to sleep is yashin, to sleep, to be dormant. This is covenant death language. Those who sleep in the dust are those who are in covenantal dormancy, cut off from the life and blessings of God's covenant, which we talked about in that first video. So we understand what death is, or the death that is in question throughout the Old Testament, from Adam all the way to Jesus Christ himself. The awakening is covenantal restoration. It's the same anastasis language established in the foundation video. Same language. Are you starting to see a theme? Because these things are all connected. When one, we are willing to accept the truth, and two, we just follow what God's word says. Despite being taught, just follow what God's word says. But let's take a look at the word yaketz. It is to awake, to rouse from sleep, used consistently in the Old Testament for awakening from a state of dormancy or inactivity, not exclusively for physical resuscitation. It's not what it's used for. That is not what it is used for. But it says some will awake to everlasting contempt. And that word is derayon olam. Derayon, abhorrence or contempt, used only here and in Isaiah 66 and 24. And then olam, which is age. The contempt of the age, the covenantal judgment and shame associated with those who reject God's covenant. Now let's look at this in Isaiah 66 and 24. This word derayon, and it says, and they will go out and look on the dead bodies of those who rebel against me. The worm that eat them will not die. The fire that burns them will not be quenched. And they will be a loathsome to all mankind. They will be a derayon, a abhorrence to all mankind. That's what it's saying. Jesus quotes Isaiah 66 and 24 and Mark 9 and 48 when he says this, describing judgment. The derayon, the contempt, is covenant judgment language consistently applied to those who rebel against God's covenant people and his purposes, whether it's God's covenant people or somebody else, somebody outside of the covenant. The critical point of timing. Now, I want you to watch this. Watch this. The resurrection of Daniel 12 and 2 is not presented as a standalone event on a distant timeline. It's presented as a same part of the same vision at the same appointed time as what? The appointed time of trouble and distress in Daniel 12 and 1. Same timeline. And it is Daniel 12 and 1 that Jesus quotes in Matthew 24 and 21. So the burden of proof is on any futurist or future coming of Jesus Christ, anyone who believes that, to divorce Daniel 12 and 2 from Daniel 12 and 1. The text presents this: the time of trouble, the time of deliverance, the time of resurrection and judgment as one unified complex of events occurring at the same appointed time. They cannot be divorced from each other. It's the same appointed time. So if the time of trouble is 70 AD and Jesus himself places it there, then the resurrection language of Daniel is also tied to the same appointed time. You cannot separate them. They are one vision, one time, one fulfillment. Resurrection cannot be separated from the timing of Daniel's tribulation. It just can't be done. And so Daniel 12 opens with the at that time and everything that follows: the deliverance of God's people, the awakening of those who sleep, and the judgment of the wicked and the glorification of the righteous is presented as part of the same appointed time. So what's the time? Well, that's what Daniel wanted to know. How long shall it be to the end of these wonders? And the angel answers, when the power of the holy people is shattered, when that happens, all these things shall be finished. That's the time. Jesus uses this same timeline, but Jesus also puts a pin in it. In Matthew 24 and 31, he says, truly, truly, I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Not some of them, not the tribulation, while the resurrection waits thousands of years longer. All these things, all of them. The resurrection of Daniel 12 belongs on the same time frame as the tribulation of Daniel 12 and 1, and Jesus places that tribulation squarely within the events leading up to the destruction of Jerusalem. If Jesus correctly identifies the timing of Daniel 12 and 1, that's a rhetorical question, then the burden of proof falls upon anyone who wishes to separate Daniel 12 and 2 and put it on a completely different timeline. It's going to take some serious hermeneutical gymnastics to pull that off. One verse later, we are on a timeline that is separated by thousands of years. Explain that one away. I'll get a bowl of popcorn because I want to see that. So then we get to Daniel 12 and 3. And it says, those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. And that word wise is maskelim, from shakal, to have insight, to be prudent, to understand. This is the same word used throughout Daniel for those who understand the vision, the covenant faith remnant who comprehend what God is doing in history. And Jesus is educating his disciples on the fulfillment of Daniel 21. He is letting them know what to be aware of, what to look out for. He is walking them through it. And then the shining like the firmament, the imagery of shining like stars is not biological transformation language. It's not what that is. It's the language of covenant honor and glory. Those who remain faithful and lead others to righteousness, receiving the honor and recognition of God's covenant blessing. It is not people shining like this ball of fire called the sun in the sky. It's not what it's talking about here. And so Jesus makes this connection in Matthew 13 and 43. Watch what he says. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. And this is after he's delivered a parable. What's going to happen at the end, the culmination of it? The righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Not like a ball of fire in the sky. That is not the shining that he has in mind here. This is the same masculine imagery. The righteous shining at the end of the age, the conclusion of the harvest, the consummation of the covenant transition. Jesus is drawing directly from Daniel 12 and 3. He's connecting the dots from Daniel 12 on down verbatim. He is connecting the dots. Everything that Daniel told to seal because it was for a later generation, Jesus is telling his disciples, this is it. So then we get to Daniel 12:4, the sealing command. But you, Daniel, roll up and seal the words of this scroll until the time of the end. Many will go here and there to increase knowledge. And that word seal is satam, to stop up, to seal, to keep secret, to hide. Now, this is a deliberate act of concealment. The vision is to be sealed, kept hidden, because the time is not yet. The events that Daniel has seen is too far off in the future. The people of his generation don't need to access this information because it's not going to be applied to them. It's for a future generation. So it is sealed. But the Hebrew word here is for until the time of the end is ad et ketz. We talked about this again in the last video. We're starting to connect these dots. It's repeated information. Nothing is new here. It's very simple to understand if you just follow what is being talked about. So this word here, ad et ketz, until the time of the end, the Hebrew ketz means end, completion, conclusion. Think about this. What did Jesus come to do? To destroy the law and the covenant? No, he didn't come to destroy it. He came to bring it to its end. He came to fulfill it. But this word ketz is specifically the end of a defined period. It is not the end of the physical universe. It is the end of the covenant age, the conclusion of the period in the vision that is being described to Daniel. It's the end of that event. This is the same ketz used throughout Daniel for the conclusion of the period of the Gentile dominance over Israel and the establishment of God's covenant purposes. But what it is not used to describe is the end of the physical earth, the cosmos. It's not used to describe that. In fact, there is no such thing as the end of the world. Nowhere in the Bible does it talk about the physical earth ending, ever. Nowhere in the Bible will you find that. Again, it's going to take some hermeneutical gymnastics to pull that off. But then the sealing of this matter, the sealing is not just any literary device. It is the theological and hermeneutical statement about timing. When God tells Daniel to seal the book, he is communicating that the events of the vision are far enough in the future that it needs to be concealed to preserve it until that time. It needs to be preserved until the time of the events, when these events are about to take place. Seal it until then. So then Daniel chapter 12, 6-7. How long? Daniel wants to know how long. If I already asked you when, now how long? How long before these events take place? How long will it be before these astonishing things are fulfilled? The man clothed in linen raised his right hand and his left hand toward heaven, and I heard him swear by him who lives forever, saying, it will be for a time, times, and half a time. When the power of the holy people has been finally broken, all these things will be completed. That is the end. The end is when the power of the holy people has been completely broken. How long, Daniel? Until that happens. When that happens, that will end it. So the question, Daniel asked the most important question in the entire chapter. How long? He wants to know the timing. So what the angel tells Daniel about the timing has two components, and we're going to look at both of them. First, there is a specific appointed time. The angel does not say these things will happen eventually. Doesn't say that. Or these things are contingent upon human choices later on in the future. When will it happen? When the power of the holy people has been finally broken. So the holy people in Daniel's context is obviously the children of Israel, the holy people, God's people. So that context narrows the scope on identifying when the power of the holy people is broken. And so the breaking of their power is the destruction of the covenant system that defined their national and religious identity. What event in history matches the power of the holy people has been finally broken? It was 70 AD. The destruction of Jerusalem, the destruction of the temple, the end of the Levitical priesthood, the scattering of the Jewish people, the completion and final dismantling of the old covenant system. So the angel is not pointing to a vague future event. He is pointing to the same event Jesus describes in Matthew 24, the destruction of the temple, which is what he is walking his disciples through in Matthew 24. The destruction of the temple, because that's what they asked him. And so he tells them when that happens, all these things will be completed. Now, it astonishes me that Jesus, this thing is the centerpiece in the history of Christianity, 70 AD. We're talking about something that literally happened, the destruction of Jerusalem. You hear Matthew 24 being preached in thousands of churches around the world. So this is not some vague or some event to be brushed off as not having that much meaning. Jesus spent a whole chapter in Matthew talking about this one event, and that literally happened in 70 AD. And yet, and still, you probably have 5% of Christians have no idea what it is. There's a reason for that. Why is it that the men and women of God do not know about this? The complete destruction of Jerusalem, just like Jesus said it would. I talk about going into a bookstore in Houston almost 20 years ago now. And I'm looking, this is when the whole 70 AD started, and God started revealing this to me 20 plus years ago. And so now I'm at a bookstore. I'm looking for some books on 70 AD because I'm wanting to learn about this now. Now that I've accepted that God has told me that this was Jesus coming and this was the end, now that I've gotten out of my little rebellious streak and I'm accepting the truth, now I want to know more about it. And I walk into a bookstore and I'm looking for this book. I can't find anything whatsoever in a Christian bookstore on 70 AD, this event that happened in Christian history that Jesus talked about. And so I go to the counter and I ask somebody if they can guide me to any books on 70 AD. This little girl back there, and she says, "What's that? 70 AD? We just don't know about it. It's not being taught." There's a reason for it. And we're going to be talking more about that reason in this series. I'm going to tell you why it's not being taught. But to keep from getting too far off track, let's move on. Let's go to Daniel chapter and verse 9, the sealing. He replied, "Go your way, Daniel, because the words are rolled up and sealed until the time of the end." The sealing command is repeated and confirmed. This is not an accidental repetition. The angel is emphasizing these words are sealed. They are not for Daniel's generation. They are not for the near future from Daniel's perspective. So you need to seal it. Jesus does not just allude to Daniel 12. He quotes it specifically, deliberately, and he places the fulfillment of Daniel chapter 12 in the lifetime of his audience, the time of trouble. He places it during the time of trouble. Daniel 12:1, a time of distress such as has not happened from the beginning of nations until then. Matthew 24:21, for there will be great distress, thlipsis, unequal from the beginning of the world until now and never to be equaled again. Direct verbal parallel. Jesus is quoting Daniel 12:1. The abomination of desolation, Daniel 12:11 mentioned the abomination that causes desolation. The abomination that causes desolation. Very important. Matthew 24:15. Now, when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through Daniel the prophet, same thing, verbatim. Jesus explicitly names Daniel as the source of this information that he is giving to his disciples about the destruction of the temple. He is quoting Daniel. Daniel is his source. He is telling his disciples what Daniel saw in his vision, they are about to experience. What Daniel saw in his vision, you are about to see in real life. You see that? So let's look at the sealing and the unsealing and how people use a different hermeneutics when it comes down to trying to make their doctrine fit within the context of God's word, and it don't fit. So we'll just change the hermeneutics. So when God tells Daniel to seal the book in Daniel 12:4 and 12:9, he is communicating the events are far off from Daniel's present. The people of Daniel's generation do not need to act on this information. The book should be preserved until the appointed time approaches. When the time approaches, the book will be unsealed and its meaning made clear. The sealing of the book is a temporal marker. It's a statement that there is distance between the time and the fulfillment, the time of the vision and the fulfillment of the vision. There's time in between there, so seal it. So this is not just a theological inference. It is confirmed by the angel in Daniel 8:26. Watch this. Another sealed vision of Daniel. The vision of the evenings and mornings that has been given you is true, but seal up the vision, for it concerns the distant future. So sealed equal distant future from the writer's perspective. Unsealed is near future from the writer's perspective. Not our perspective, from the writer. We have to let God's word interpret itself. This is the hermeneutical principle. So now let's apply it consistently. So Daniel 12:4, seal up the book until the time of the end. Daniel 12:9, the words are sealed until the time of the end. Daniel 8:26, seal up the vision, for it concerns the distant future. There is a gap from Daniel to fulfillment. Daniel received the vision approximately 530 to 535 BC. Approximately. The destruction of Jerusalem and the temple occurred in 70 AD. That's approximately 600 years. 600 years was far enough in the future that God told Daniel to seal the book. The people of Daniel's generation needed to preserve it and not act on it. So seal it. Seal it up. Revelation 22:10, do not seal up the word of the prophecy of this scroll, because the time is near. Now, Daniel is told to seal up the book because it's far off. Revelation, do not seal up the book because it is near. The angel gives John the exact opposite instructions from what the angel gave Daniel. Exact opposite. And the reason given is explicit, because the time was near in John. From the author John's perspective, the time was near. So the Greek word ingus is for near, close, at hand, imminent. This word has well-defined semantic range in Koine Greek. It means proximity in either space or time, something that is close, not far off. Never means that. Ingus never means far off, never. It is used in the New Testament consistently for things that are imminently approaching. In Matthew chapter 24, verses 32 and 33, when you see all these things, you know that it is near ingus, right at the door. Luke chapter 21, 30 and 31, you can see for yourselves and know that summer is near ingus. The kingdom of God is near ingus. Ingus. Philippians 4:5, the Lord is near ingus. James 5:8, the Lord's coming is near ingus. The Lord's coming is near. This is James, the half brother of Jesus, saying that Jesus' coming is near. And yet, 2,000 years later, we're teaching that we're still waiting on it. Imagine that. Revelation 1:3, because the time is near ingus. And then, of course, Revelation 22:10. The semantic range of ingus in every usage in the New Testament points to imminence. Something about to happen, something at the door, something the current generation will experience. There is not a single usage in the New Testament of the word ingus being used as something 2,000 or more years away. Not once. Not once. And then there's the Greek word tachos. In Revelation 1:1, the revelation from Jesus Christ to show his servant what must soon take place in Taki. Revelation 22:6, the angel said to me, these words are trustworthy and true. The Lord, the God who inspires the prophets, sent his angels to show his servants the thing that must soon take place in Taki. Now, the Greek word entaki is speed, quickness, shortly, soon. So how is it used in Greek literature? In Koine Greek, tachos in its related forms consistently means speed of action, happening quickly or swiftly, imminence, happening soon from the speaker's perspective. Now, I watched this video by Dr. Ken Gentry, and he's doing a walkthrough of Revelation, and he was talking about the timing of the book Revelation, and he is dating Revelation. And so he's walking through, and he talked about this word tachos and how that means how we get our word, English word, tachometer on our vehicles from this Greek word. And he does a walkthrough, excellent teaching or training on that, on Revelation. Very, very informative. So he gets through it and he says, now I do believe in a future coming of Jesus Christ. I almost fell off my chair. It's like, you're serious? So basically, you're saying that all of these these revelations in Revelation points to something near at hand to the day John wrote. Nonetheless, I'm saying I believe in a future coming of Jesus Christ. But anyway, Idell and Scott Greek lexicon. When the New Testament uses entaki, it means what it says: quickly, soon, without delay. There's no ambiguity to it. It means what it says. So how does the New Testament use it? In Luke 18:8, he will see that they get justice and quickly, entaki, the same word, clearly meaning soon. Not justice 2,000 years later, not justice hundreds of years later, let alone 2,000 years later. In Acts 2:7, quickly, get up, urgency. Now, this is the angel. This is Peter. He's locked in chains, and the angel came, took the shackles are off, the light shone, and he had to poke Peter to wake him up. And so, can you imagine being poked in the side with two fingers? This is the vision that I get when I see this, because the angel had to wake him up out of his sleep and told him to arise, get up quickly, get out. Now, do you think that he was telling Peter, lay around for a couple of thousand years, a couple of hundred years, I'll get a lawn chair. Sooner or later, I need you to get up and go. No. Entaki, get up right now. Urgency, immediacy. In Acts 22:18, quickly leave Jerusalem, immediately get out. Entaki, quickly. Romans 16:20, God of peace will soon, entaki, crush Satan under his feet. So the standard applied to Daniel. God seals Daniel's book because the events are far off, approximately 600 years away. The sealing communicates this is not for your generation. Preserve it. The time has not yet come. People that believe in a future coming of Jesus Christ accepts this. They agree the sealing in Daniel indicates the events were distanced from Daniel's time. They agree with that. Now apply the same standard to Revelation. John is told not to seal the book because the time is near. If sealing communicates far off, then not sealing communicates near. And near is confirmed twice explicitly. Ingus in Revelation 22:10 and entaki in Revelation 1:1 and Revelation 22:6. If 600 years was far enough in the distance for Daniel to seal his book, why wouldn't 2,000 years in counting be enough time to justify John sealing his book? Why are we applying a completely different hermeneutics to Revelation than we are to Daniel? Now, I talked about Ken Gentry and him dating the book of Revelation, and his point was that this was before the destruction of the temple. And there's endless debate about this. People talk about, well, it was written in, that doesn't matter, because there is too much room for just endless debate about this here. We can debate this thing 24 hours a day for 365 days and walk away and nobody's convinced. So if we allow the text to speak for itself, it becomes obvious this was before 70 AD. It was written to churches to warn them about events that was coming, which was 70 AD and the destruction of the temple. So I'm not going to get into that. I just accept the fact that this was before 70 AD. Debate it all day long. It was before 70 AD. John is told, and watch this. think about this. John is told in Revelation 11 to measure the temple, but the temple is already destroyed. You're measuring a destroyed temple that Jesus said would be completely destroyed to the point where there's not one brick up on top of another. And he's told to measure it. Makes no sense. But nonetheless, I want you to think about this. John is told not to seal it because these events are about to take place. The entire thing is focused on God's people in that day because Jesus instructed him to send this out to the 7 churches that existed during that time. What's the point of all of this if it was not going to affect them? It makes no sense. None whatsoever. We are writing you to warn you about these events. Nonetheless, there are thousands of years in the future. It makes no sense whatsoever. But now you notice that the book of John does not have a Olivet Discourse. When we were talking about the word eremosis, which we'll talk more about in the next video because we're going to be going through the Olivet Discourse. But you'll notice that the book of John doesn't have a Olivet Discourse. It doesn't have one. Matthew, Mark, and Luke have one. John doesn't have one. This is John's extended version of the Olivet Discourse. And what's the Olivet Discourse about? It's about 70 AD, the things that are going to affect the people in the first century. That's what it's about. That's who it was for. His disciples, his people in that day. Okay, so I'm gonna walk you through something. Up until this point, we've kind of been looking at things through a keyhole. I'm about to fling the door wide open for you. And this is probably something you've never seen before or never heard before, a connection that you've never made before. And you tell me if it resonates or not. You be the judge of that. But leading up until Daniel, you know how I was explaining that Daniel 12 is the kind of like the culmination of a vision that was being given to him by the angel. And so I want to make a connection for you. And this is just going to blow your mind. And again, you tell me if it resonates or not. So what's happening in Daniel chapter 9, Daniel is reading the book of Jeremiah. And he sees something in Jeremiah that's disturbing to him. And he does what comes natural to a Jew, especially in that day and that time. He went to prayer. And so what did he read in in Jeremiah that disturbed him so bad? It was the 70 weeks. So what he did is he went to prayer. And while he was praying to God about this vision that disturbed him so bad, in Daniel chapter 9, verse 20, it said that the angel appeared to him, and it was the angel Gabriel. And so Gabriel tells him this about what he had saw, what he had read, and he's about to try to make it make sense to him. So he says in Daniel chapter 9 and verse 24, 70 weeks has been decreed for your people and the holy city to finish the wrongdoing, to make an end of sin, to make atonement for guilt, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. In the next few verses, what he does is he gives Daniel a compressed version of what he will talk about in more detail in 10, 11, and 12. But he says this in verse 26. He says this, then after 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing. And the people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. Will destroy the city and the sanctuary. This is what is disturbing Daniel. This is disturbing to him as a Jew. So the question is, what is this destruction of the city and the sanctuary? It's 70 AD. It is the destruction of the city and the sanctuary that ends the old covenant. It is the very thing that Jesus is talking about in Matthew 24. So when we get to Daniel chapter 12 and we walk through those first 4 verses and we get to verse 4 and the angel tells Daniel to seal this prophecy, that is an account of the events that will end the old covenant. This is what the angel is explaining to Daniel. But he doesn't give him the details of that event, which is why in chapter 12, verse 4, he tells him to seal it. Why did he tell him to seal it? Because these events, as we have talked about, will not affect them. So you seal it until the generation that it will affect. So what do you find in the Olivet Discourse? Jesus is explaining the events surrounding the destruction of the temple and the sanctuary. This is what the angel tells Daniel is going to happen. The city and the sanctuary is going to be destroyed. How does Jesus put this destruction? Not one brick will be left upon another that shall not be thrown down. It's about the destruction of Jerusalem. Now follow me, because this is extremely important. Again, you've been looking at this thing through a keyhole up until this point. I'm about to throw the door wide open for you. Now, with that in mind, follow me. Let's go to Revelation chapter 5. And what do you find? You find God sitting on the throne, and he has a sealed book in his right hand. What book does he have? The book of Daniel. That the one that the angel in Daniel chapter 12, verse 4, told him to seal. So now we have God with this sealed book in his right hand. And then what you have is an angel saying with a loud voice, who is able to break the seals of the book and open it and reveal the contents. This is what the angel is asking. Now we have an angel told Daniel to seal his book. Now we have God with the book in his right hand and an angel saying who is worthy to break the seals of the book and reveal the contents. What happens after that? A lamb emerges if it's been slain. Who is this lamb? Jesus Christ, the Messiah. He has been crucified for our sins. His innocent blood has been shed. He is worthy to open the book and break the seals. So when the Messiah, the slain lamb, takes the book out of God's hand, what happens? Everything in heaven falls down and worships him. They bow before him. Then what happens in Revelation chapter 6 and verse 1? He breaks the first seal. He is revealing the contents of Daniel's vision. Daniel's sealed book. He's revealing the contents. Now follow me here. So Matthew chapter 24, Jesus' disciples ask him about the temple. Look at how beautiful it is. Jesus tells them, you see this city that you're pointing at? It's going to be destroyed. The city and the sanctuary are going to be destroyed. So the disciples asked the only logical question that could be asked at that time, because they're a Jew. And you just told me this thing is going to be destroyed. This is God on earth among us. This is the covenant. They understood that well. And you telling me it's going to be destroyed? When is this going to happen? What they are asking the Messiah, knowingly or unknowingly, they are asking him to unseal Daniel's book and reveal the contents. Because Daniel's sealed book is about the destruction of Jerusalem and the sanctuary to end the old covenant. But Daniel was told to seal it. Why? Because it's not going to affect you or the people of your day. Jesus is breaking the seal to reveal the contents to his disciples. Why? Because it's going to affect them. It's going to affect this generation. So what the Olivet Discourse is doing is revealing the contents of Daniel's sealed vision. Why? Because it's going to affect them. You need to be prepared. You need to be ready. Because within your generation, I am going to do Revelation chapter 6, verse 1, break the first seal. Judgment is about to rain down on Jerusalem. So you need to be aware so that you can get out. When you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, you get out. Judgment is here. So the Olivet Discourse is Jesus breaking the seals of Daniel's sealed book in Daniel chapter 12, verse 4. You see that? Do you see that? Do you see the connection from Daniel's seal book to the seal book being in the hand of he who sits on the throne in heaven, in his right hand, the seal book? And the angel told Daniel to seal it. Now we have an angel in Revelation chapter 5 asking who is worthy to break the seals. And the slain lamb emerges as worthy to break the seals. And in Revelation 6:1, he breaks the first seal. This is what he is explaining to his disciple. So what do we find in Matthew chapter 24:4? Be aware, because many will come in my name. Don't let them deceive you. They need to know that. Daniel didn't. You will hear of wars and rumors of war. They need to know that. Daniel didn't. When you see this, don't be alarmed. Just know that the end is coming, but the end is not yet. They needed to know that. Daniel didn't. There will be earthquakes and famines and all of these things. They needed to know that. Daniel didn't. He is unsealing Daniel's sealed book. You will be hated amongst the nation. False prophets will rise up. All of these things will happen. They needed to know that. Daniel didn't. So you seal it, Daniel. The abomination of desolation in Matthew chapter 24:14, Jesus is quoting Daniel's vision. He is quoting Daniel's vision. His disciples needed to know that. Daniel didn't. Jesus is unveiling Daniel's sealed book to his disciples. That's what the Olivet Discourse is about. So it's much more than just the destruction of Jerusalem. It's much more than that. It's the unveiling of Daniel's prophecy. You see that? Is that resonating with you? So you tell me if that resonates with you, because this is just the lead in to our next video, which is going to be on the Olivet Discourse. We're going to walk through that. But now that we have this foundation to work with, we understand what's going on in the Olivet Discourse. So now let's look at it in more detail. Let's flesh some of these things out. And we'll do that in our next video. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. Like the video, subscribe to my channel, and we will see you in the next video. Bye for now.